And when you are a citizen and you participate in the government of your local area and you feel like you actually have sway and say in that government and it influences big policies, what's going to happen is everything's going to become more meaningful. Basically, without citizenship, everything falls apart. And the idea of the citizen is no longer sacred. It's absolutely been trashed. Where human flourishing starts at is social cohesion. Let's begin. So Aristotle viewed the state as a partnership for promoting virtue and the good life, basically where citizens work together. Jefferson took a lot from Aristotle following his classical thinking, and he kind of adapted it to Enlightenment values. And Jefferson wrote Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. And this was the foundation of the American idea. How can we create a state that promotes life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Very Enlightenment values. And it worked for a time. It worked really well. America has its problems, as every state will. But it worked. I just think any large nation state is doomed to tragic failure. But basically, whether it's in Athens or America, a democratic state forms when a community decides how to govern itself to maximize mutual benefit. And this is where the idea of civic virtue comes in. Civic virtue simply means we before me. It's the glue that holds together a healthy republic. Citizens is basically when you put the team before me, and this is actually the foundation of Navy SEAL life. If we look at Navy SEALs, they will often sacrifice their lives for their comrades. They're trained from day one to put the team first, to fulfill the mission, to serve the community. And this is very beautiful. And this is an example of very high social cohesion is in a Navy SEAL team. But let's be real about human nature here. We only will put the team first when we feel intimately bonded to one another and to a larger project. The reason Navy SEALs put that team first is because they have a lot of meaning. They love and respect their comrades. They have trained together for years and are deeply bonded as a unit. And the more powerful a shared group feeling is, this is an idea called asabiya from Ibn Khaldun, the more powerful the shared group feeling is, the more people will put the team first. And the more estranged a community is, the less fucks people give about the whole. So civic virtue dies without a strong sense of social cohesion, right? So if we took that Navy SEAL team, right, and then we filled it up with untrained civilians, and then we added some foreign strangers, and then we even added a few enemies into that platoon of, 25 men, right? We had 25 strangers, enemies, and untrained civilians. There would be confusion about what the team is even fighting for anymore. The tribal sense will collapse almost immediately, and the social cohesion will be destroyed. And many of the men, will all fall apart, or little pockets and fractures will occur, and smaller groups will branch off. Basically, a group needs internal culture and pride, and outsiders can only join or assimilate into a Navy SEAL group, right? If they are valuable to the team, if they go through some shared struggles and maybe an initiation into the team before they are accepted as one of the team. And if an outsider doesn't go through these kinds of struggles, the team will resent the strangers who become burdens, or the team will just fall apart. Now, obviously, this has some ties to modern immigration problems and things going on. And I just always encourage people, when we're looking at grand geopolitical problems or national problems, I'm always thinking in terms of community, because I truly believe that we're going to build the towns of the future. And if it's not me, it's going to be the next generation. And when we do this, my friends, when we're building the next towns, when we think on a very small scale, let's say I had 100 people together. We gathered and filtered 100 awesome people. We're building super aligned teams within that. We wouldn't just go and let in anyone off the streets or anyone even graduating from an Ivy League school. People would have to be vetted. And furthermore, they would have to be highly bought in to our mission and wanting to become one of us. Because if you don't have that energy within a small community, every single member you add is actually going to take away from the spirit of the community, from the social cohesion of the community. And anything you do to subtract social cohesion from people basically destroys civic virtue. Because if you don't feel deeply bonded with your team or with your tribe, it just feels like a random collection of strangers with no real common spirit, well, then it's every man for himself. And this is what we're seeing in the modern West. There's rapid atomization. People feel more alone than ever. They don't know their neighbors, let alone would they even die for their neighbors, fight for their neighbors, love their neighbors? Hell no. We don't have any social cohesion because we have lost the unifying spirit of America, or the unifying spirit within a town. And this, again, if we want to look at big geopolitical issues or national issues, always break it down to the smaller unit. So if we want to build a world-class team in a business, for instance, you'd first have to have a grand vision for that business, right? So if you want to build a world-class business, have a world-class vision, and then attract world-class talent. You would not want to go pick up all the homeless men or even Ivy League students or even really top professionals unless they were bought into the vision and wanted to go all in with you. The team is a sacred unit, and the tribe is a sacred unit. And the moment that tribes got too big and got infiltrated with too many diverse ideologies and threats and, open borders and all these different things, and globalism took over and everyone started transplanting everywhere, the idea of tribe has absolutely fallen away. I was just talking to my grandma the other night, and the crazy side note, my grandma's grandfather, lived during the Civil War. Crazy to think that we're not that far away from the American Civil War. Like, my grandma knew someone in it, right? So I say this to demonstrate how quickly times have changed. When my grandma was growing up, everyone, every single Sunday in the entire town she lived in, went to church together. They saw each other at church. They prayed together. They did small talk. You were familiar with most people in your community. That was the norm across the entire America, with small farming, agricultural communities armed to the teeth, and then you have industrial, cities also. But basically, even 70 years ago, we had this idea of a sacred unit and a sacred center within our communities, and all of this has absolutely fallen away. There's many different views that people take on the collapse of community and the collapse of society that we're seeing right now. And many of the green memers, as I pointed out with my aunt earlier, are blind to the small scale. They're blind to how would they build a community or build a tribe on a very small scale. They think, just let anyone in, but that's going to dilute the culture. That's going to dilute the mission and the sense of social cohesion together, and therefore people won't be as bought in. And I made a whole video about this, about radical exclusion and then radical inclusion. I don't want to get into the weeds of politics today. I don't really care for contemporary politics. I want to talk about building an awesome town. So social cohesion, real quick recap, is about high buy-in, right? You're in, and then cooperation towards a goal. Without it, self-interest dominates, groups collapse. So this brings us to the second point I want to discuss in this video, and that is citizenship. So the first point, social cohesion, it comes from a shared spirit, okay? This is really important. When people have a shared spirit, they have an ideal that they're striving for together, in a sense of, this is who we are. This is my tribe, and I love and take pride in my people. Like, think of George Washington sailing the Delaware right here. I think that's the name of this painting. And all of these people around him bought into this mission of American independence and freedom, a new nation, a new frontier, new towns and open spaces, right? Like, think of this incredible harnessing of spirit that happened at the birth of America. And this shared spirit created a really strong social cohesion to start with. And I would argue that it is that social cohesion that allowed America to become the empire that it has become today, along with a million other advantages. But this is primary. So the spirit is what unites people and births a culture, right? And once a culture is birthed, what you have to have is citizenship. And this was one of the main topics of philosophy and debate and, ideology of the ancient world. Citizenship, I would break it down, is essentially a stake in the land and a stake in self-governance. If people have these two things, they will naturally become more virtuous and more closely bonded to each other. So basically, without citizenship, everything falls apart. And the idea of the citizen is no longer sacred. It's absolutely been trashed. You see, for Aristotle, citizenship was not a right given to everyone, but rather a status reserved for those who actively participated in the political life of the state. He believed that property ownership, particularly land, made citizens more engaged with good government. Basically, the foundation of America was based on citizenship, self-governance in small communities, right? And virtue and God. Like, this is what really built these towns in the first place, was private land ownership and citizenship. And when you are a citizen and you participate in the government of your local area and you feel like you actually have sway and say in that government and it influences big policies, what's going to happen is everything's going to become more meaningful. You're going to engage with your neighbors and engage with your school and the projects going on within your community and the people in your community because it matters to you. And this is the thing, I think stake is the most important thing in my mind when it comes to building communities, and we need to get crafty about how we think about this. Citizenship is basically having a long-term stake in a larger project. When people don't own property or see a long-term future for their families within a town, they don't care as much. They don't invest as much. Ownership ties individuals to the community and fosters long-term thinking. Without it, you get atomization. I've lived in quite a few intentional communities. And the biggest problem with intentional communities is the types of people they attract, which tends to be freeloaders and, unambitious, kind of like spiritual seeking people that just want community for community's sake. It's a big problem with intentional communities. The other thing is it's all transient. No one truly has a stake in that community because they're not bought into a larger mission there. Therefore, they're there for a year, or they're there for a month, or they're there for 10 years. It doesn't really matter. They never own anything. They're not bought into the project, and therefore they don't really care. Every community I've lived in, it's always the community manager or the owner doing so much of the work and then harassing people or trying to get on people to help them do their thing. And it's because people, if they don't own the land, they're not going to really take care of it. For instance, have you ever rented a house? Right? Did you ever clean up the yard? Start a garden, fix the garage? Absolutely not. You probably just kind of did whatever to get by because you knew you're going to move in a year or two. But the moment you own a house, you're going to add to it. You're going to make it better. And especially if your consciousness is in the state of mind of, I'm going to pass down this house, this piece of land, and this community to my children's children's children, and this is the beginning of a legacy. Think about how much meaning that property and that community has for you. This is why the Native Americans often thought or taught in terms of 7 generations. They would think 7 generations ahead because they were so invested in their people. Compare that to how invested you feel in your neighbors right now, in the land you live on, in the community around you. Probably not at all. And this is why I'm raising the alarm, is that, guys, we're at the end of social breakdown, and new social revival is going to come when leaders rise up to build new towns and communities, right? And start thinking generations ahead once more. So, in terms of, citizenship, land ownership, buy into a project, it increases meaning, it increases commitment to the whole. Last point here is if you were going to start a really awesome business, which we are doing in the Retribalize project, me and some guys are traveling the world, beginning this AI automation company for building communities, right? So as we do this business, as guys filter in and prove themselves, if I want them to be high up in the business and also they have best friend potential with me, what I would probably do is offer them equity, give them a percentage of the business, so that therefore they feel ownership and wanting to make it better. This is a tried and true, method within business, is you make, leaders, owners, part owners of the company, and therefore you have more buy-in. So, quick recap of these 2 principles before we dive into community, God, and virtue as the foundation of the next towns. Real quick here, though, if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes or Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review on this podcast. This podcast is brand new, but I'm really trying to reach the right people so we can start our first Retribalize project. So real quick here, leave that review. True democracy can only thrive when people feel connected and leaders are held accountable, which is a different video. And when you have shared group feeling and pride in the larger community, when there is buy-in. If there's no buy-in, if there's transient energy, no one gives a shit. That's why you need to eliminate it immediately. So when it comes to buy-in, my friends, I'm even doing this with friends right now. I have a lot of acquaintances, a lot of larger circles and whatnot, but if I'm gonna really like invest and hang out with people for long periods of time, I wanna see a collectively increasing amount of buy-in. I'm not looking for just friends and acquaintances in a network. I'm looking for men and women I can intertwine my destiny with. I'm looking for like lifelong chosen family. And that means buy-in from those people, right? Really hard to find people like that. You need a big filter and a big funnel, which is why I started this YouTube channel. So when you have more buy-in, even on a very small scale, let's say you and one or two other friends have that sacred pact that we're brothers. We're going to build together, we're going to train together, and we're going to go to the stars together, right? We're going to do it together. When you have that sacred buy-in, and even in a very small way, you understand the power of a loyal bond like that. And the fact of the matter is even if you just have one or two bonds like that, it makes your dreams that much more tangible, and it creates this center of mass, this center of gravity and power that can expand. And then you also realize that for someone to really join you, in your culture, to understand your heart and your mind and link their destiny with you, they need to form that bond with you. This is how wolf packs grow. And this is the foundation of the retribalized projects. Retribalized projects are very different from intentional communities. And they're different from the network state, these big abstract online communities that try to manifest into the real world. Retribalized projects, the word I'm kind of coding in here, is essentially starts at a very small unit, what I call a wolf pack. And when you build high amounts of buy-in and collective will and collective destiny within even one other person, and then two people, and then three people, you build this progressively snowballing effect. And this is the level of buy-in that you need to extrapolate to 100 people. So if you want a community, it's not just gathering 100 strangers, right? It's building a team to 6 people, and then connecting with my team, and then connecting with another team, and then slowly forming these into a common spirit. And when you find people who have a common spirit and want to strive with you, who want to struggle with you, you're gonna build a large amount of buy-in, where even if shit hits the fan for someone, they're still with you because we're building family. That's the whole point of what community actually is. Like, tribe is no one left behind unless you get exiled. So, okay. Enough of the heartfelt discussion there on true male friendship and bonds. We need to rebuild the sense of group identity. This is what we all long for. The sense of this is our clan, this is our ideals, and we go together. Welcome to every high point in human history and what your soul longs for, tribe. So, community, God, and virtue. The final point of building a healthy society, what I've gleaned from, looking at the founding fathers and Aristotle and Plato, is I think the very foundation of a successful nation is something around religion, God, and virtue. And it's very interesting that you could argue that civilization progression from like the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution, these things were actually inspired by religion. It was religion that truly binds people together and creates a common spirit amongst them. It's a way of relating to the world and relating to God. And this is why, even within your friend groups and the communities of the future, you need to create some kind of shared spiritual practice. I know with my friends, I love to meditate. We love to do martial arts and have deep talks, every Sunday or whenever we're hanging out. And we have this way of doing ritual together, of dancing together, of going deep together, of getting wild together. And your shared ritual, it could be Christian, it could be, some kind of Sufi mystic religion or spiritual, tradition, or, Jewish, or whatever it is. It's just some way of relating to the deeper questions of life, to like the raw. Like, my friends, we're all gonna die here. Life is absurd. And like, how can we love each other and work towards an ideal together? And how can we just be real with each other and get into that heart space? This is the foundation of a healthy tribe, a tribe that dances together, that does music together, it stays together. And when you have a shared spiritual practice, right, you have some relationship to God as a whole, hence church has always been the center of society, right? When you have a sacred center of society, and you have community, you automatically have virtue, okay? So hear me out on this. There is no virtue if there is no community, because you can only really have honor if other people are holding you accountable. Your community ideal is honor, and you want it yourself, right? I know for me in my life, and probably in yours, you've worked to grow in many different ways. But you know what makes it way harder? Is not having brothers beside you who are embodying that ideal and helping you along, who are helping you through your weaknesses, who are demanding excellence of you. And furthermore, if you slip up and you fall back into drinking and getting drunk every day, having people who love and support you, but also be like, yo, bro, that's a shame. Like, there's actually reputation, there's community support, there's a collective culture of virtue. And when you have that, people strive together. This is really the foundation of higher cultures. If we look at ancient Greece, their entire culture was based on this idea of arete, of excellence. Men strove against each other in every way, not to destroy their enemy, but to be rivals that are striving for the ideal together. To Plato, this was the foundational idea of what friendship meant. Friendship to Plato meant striving together, striving for God together, striving for intellectual knowledge together, striving for personal excellence, or in combat together, right? When you strive together, you grow together, you bond together, you naturally become more honorable. This is actually what my next video is going to be all about, is why only community will create virtue, and that we're not meant to do all this personal development stuff alone. In fact, personal development is the natural outcome if you have a meaningful mission and people going there with you, right? If we have the mission of building a village with our friends and then creating awesome space technology to get into space, guess what? You're going to become more disciplined. You're going to become more loving within your community. You're naturally going to grow into more honor and virtue if that's the myth that is guiding the spirit of your people.